Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Now, we know how little respect the SNP give women. We know that they don't really care for them. We know they're trying to eradicate them as a class and try and change even the definition of what a woman is to include mentally ill men. And so it should come as no surprise that there's very little support for our crisis centres across Scotland. And Monica Lennon, a Labour MP, or MSP, my apologies, has asked Humza Yousaf, urged him to find some funding in the forthcoming budget to try and help and assist the funding of our crisis centres across Scotland because they are so important. And the problem, I feel, is that he may even offer to do that. He may offer to help them, but under the condition that they accept mentally ill men can be women, and mentally ill men can turn up at these crises centres, to pretend that they also are victims, rather than what is usually the case, the perpetrators. Anyway, we'll take a look at this, see how bad it is, but you just know this is typical SNP Scotland. So I would say one thing to Monica Lennon: don't hold your breath. Here goes. So, Labour MSP Monica Lennon urges Humza Yousaf to save almost 30 our crisis jobs. Some 28 support workers could lose their jobs if more money does not become available beyond the end of March next year. Now, of course, I'm not going to go into the details, but Monica Lennon has, let's just say, a vested interest in this field. She's made claims in the past. Unfortunately, very little was done about it. That she was abused by a senior member of Scottish Labour. I can't really say too much again because I don't want to make statements. I might get prosecuted. But there is a history with Monica. So she knows whereof she speaks, as it were. She's someone who has a great interest in these things for obvious reasons. And of course, the last thing she wants to see is men having access to these centres. Because it would... How can we put this? If it was illegal to stop a man going in, there'd be no reason to stop the man who may have perpetrated the crime from joining in a centre's, meeting with his own victim. This is how bad it is in Scotland at the moment. No one wants to protect women. And of course, Humza Yousaf certainly doesn't. He seems to think that women are disposable and usable simply for his pleasure, apparently and allegedly. Labour MSP Monica Lennon has urged Humza Yousaf to save almost 30 Our Crisis jobs that could be axed if a vital fund is cut by the Scottish Government. Our Crisis Scotland warned last year of catastrophic job losses unless funding is extended. A grant to cut waiting lists was introduced by Scottish Government to deal with huge backlogs in 2021. But of course, they say, we're going to give you this grant or whatever, but then they cut the grant, they don't do it, they don't follow through, they lie. And I don't think anyone would be completely surprised if I told you that. Gosh, the SNP telling tall tales and lying. Who'd have thought it, eh? Some 28 support workers could lose their jobs if more money does not become available beyond the end of March next year. Central Scotland MSP Lennon says that our survivors will be failed by Scottish Government if an emergency waiting list fund is ditched. And of course, this is the same Scotland that allows a man to walk free from court after hiring a child. So, their views on this particular crime seem to be very much male-based rather than female-based. It's almost as though if a woman gets hard, it's her fault. That's the sort of thing you get in countries ruled by certain religious groups, isn't it? There is particularly one religious group that seems to blame women for this crime, and it's very harsh on the woman. Seems very odd and unfair, but that's how they think. And so, of course, when you have one of this particular group running a country, for example, like Scotland, you won't expect too much to be done to aid the victims of this particular crime. You have to wonder why you would choose someone who is culturally unaware of the feelings of the country in which he claims he belongs. It's a very odd situation, isn't it? Anyway, Lennon said, our survivors rely on specialist workers to help them cope with the trauma of sexual V. The rules for, I've got to say at this point, the rules for certain words on YouTube are very strict, and it can be, you have to be very careful. So that, do understand that I'm saying this particularly just to try and not get, entroubled, as it were, with certain words. So forgive my floweriness of my language on it. But anyway, the Scottish Government must not abandon the women and girls who receive lifeline support from our crisis centres across Scotland. If the funding pot to bring down waiting lists is not continued beyond March 2024, 28 our crisis support workers will lose their jobs and lives will be at risk. Yes, but we've already seen in the previous video how they're callously disregarding 25,000 deaths on the NHS because they don't want to accept help. So what makes you think they're going to care one toss about people like this? They've already shown how they don't really care about the crime. So why should they care about the support? This is the SNP, after all. They're trying to encourage that kind of thing, it seems. The public health emergency can be averted at the stroke of a ministerial pen. Survivors of sexual assault already wait too long for support, and without sustainable funding, delays will increase. The First Minister will not be forgiven by any survivors and their families if he fails to act. Minister awarded Crisis Scotland over 1.1 million in 2021 to tackling spiralling waits. Well, I've got another idea. Is if actually you started jailing people that did this rather than releasing them back on the streets, there might be a lot less of it. But that's just me, More funding could be announced in the budget later this month, although the Deputy First Minister, Shona Robertson, has warned of potential cuts. Of course she has. She's got a cut in every single department, except independent spending, because of independent spending. She's not going to cut the foreign embassies. She's not going to cut the glossy magazines. But all the councils are going to go bankrupt. The NHS is going to have a below inflation rise. Police Scotland are going to have a below inflation rise. Everything that people care for is either not going to get going to get below inflation rise, or actually be cut. But hey, independence, yeah, plenty of money for that. Oh, and giving money away to Muslim countries. Plenty of money for that as well. Another 2 million here, 1 million there, whatever. As long as the money's given away to Muslim countries, they look good. That's what's happening. And if you don't believe me, go check their own figures. They have not given one brass farthing in foreign aid out of Scotland to a country that is not a Muslim country. That, I'm afraid, is a fact. Unfortunate for them, but that's the truth. But then when you look at the leader, is it a surprise? When our crisis centres are not available to offer immediate support, this can have a knock-on effect on the NHS and other public services. We hear a lot of welcome words from politicians and decision makers about how valuable our services are. But words cost nothing. You need money. And they don't do that because it won't improve independence bids. This is the people of Scotland suffering because of the sort of monomaniacal obsession by the SNP. We need to see those words being matched with meaningful long-term funding so that staff and survivors can be assured that we can continue to deliver these services for years to come. Don't hold your breath, Monica. Really don't bother. We're going to see later today how bad the situation is in terms of money across the whole of Scotland. And so if you think they're going to give you another £1 million, I think you're going to be very, very disappointing. Despite all the money they've received from Westminster that they haven't spent anywhere, seems to have gone missing. It does seem very highly suspect, and I would suggest possibly thievery, theft, embezzlement on a massive scale to the tune of tens of millions of pounds to enrich all those in the SNP. It's no different from an African third world state where the leaders all have lots and lots of money and the people starve in the streets. That's modern day Scotland under the SNP cartel. But anyway, I shall stop there. I shall come up and we shall feel sorry for the girls and the women that are suffering at the hand of Humza Yousaf and his ilk. The ones who, when of course he was the Justice Minister, he brought in the rules that softened the punishments for this kind of crime, that softened the punishments for child abuse, that basically said if you're under 25 you don't go to jail for it, which will then be extended and salami sliced older and older and older in order to make this kind of crime not just acceptable but legal. That seems to be the direction of travel under Humza Yousaf. Now that he's leader, of course, he can push it even further and cut the funding for all these things and just tell the women, you're just going to have to get used to it. After all, in Scotland's future, there's going to be an awful lot more of it. Coming up. So there you go, another one of those unfortunate truths that the SNP dislikes so much. They cut funding to our crisis centres because the future is a lot more of our. They don't punish people for committing sexual offences against very young people because the future is P. They don't want to spend money on human beings, only on independence. The principle being that once they are totally independent, nobody can tell them what to do, and they can turn it really into the sort of state that they want. The sort of state so beloved, I think, of their current leader and his particular group. That seems to be the direction of travel. Honesty, decency, integrity, things of the past, things that are against his culture, shall we say. He wants to change the culture of Scotland and make it basically a failed state, but somewhere welcoming to all the dross of the world, and where white people will be basically evicted into England just so that they can have this paradise. But not white children, of course, not the white children, they'll keep them. But they want to keep this paradise north of the border, where this is why they're giving all that money away exclusively to Muslim countries. Now, you don't believe me, I know. Go and check. Go and check the numbers. Go and see where foreign aid from Scotland has gone. I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope that nothing happens to any of the women, because it's an awful crime. And it's going to get far worse in Scotland because there'll be no one there to help you. And that will be deliberate policy. Never mind. You keep voting for the SNP, you get more SNP. Till next time, stay safe, stay well, and please, for heaven's sake, get rid of these degenerate tossers. Bye.